I think that my grandmother is worthy of lasting forever. Being an archivist is specific because the goal is to preserve the work, right? And by the time I had considered what it meant to be an archivist, I was like, duh, bar none. It's because of my grandmother, and those stories about my grandmother and her siblings and my mom, etc., deserve to last forever. And though I wasn't around for a lot of those stories, my commitment is to preserve them. So my grandmother passed away 3 days after I turned 21 years old. And me and my grandmother always had a super dope relationship. She was always like the OG, cutting ass, like funny, like really service oriented, just like about her business. But when she passed away, what really messed me up, I was like, dang, there's so much that I don't know. You know, like I hear about my grandmother from my uncles, from my cousins, from my aunts, from my mom. And I just felt like there was a void. At that point, I just wanted to make her last forever. Like, I think that my grandmother is worthy of lasting forever. I think the first article I talked about my grandmother, I had one Glamour magazine, top 20 under 25, and I had a Daily News article, and they wrote my grandmother's whole name in that joint. And I was like, oh, this is different. So I really just copied and pasted. I contributed to a Kickstarter for vintage Black glamour because I thought it was in alignment with my grandmother, like Black women being jiggy per usual. And I put her name in it instead of mine. And I just kept doing it. I just kept doing it over and over and over and over again. And by the time I had considered, you know, what it meant to be an archivist, I was like, oh yeah, it's because of, like, duh, bar none. It's because of my grandmother. And being an archivist is specific because the goal is to preserve the work, right? And so, yeah, the commitment to preserving my grandmother's legacy has always been there from the jump, even when I didn't have the language for it. And I'm like, those stories about my grandmother and her siblings, about my grandmother and my mom and my uncles and her nieces and nephews and her cousins, etc., deserve to last forever. And though I wasn't around for a lot of those stories, my commitment is to preserve them. There's this infamous story in my family of my grandmother, right? So Jessie Mae Jones Doherty, I always say the whole name so we know it's real. There was a time in which my grandmother and my mother moved to Fort Greene. The rest of my family lived in Brownsville. Brownsville is notoriously known in New York for having the most concentrated housing projects, right? And so my grandmother is visiting her siblings. It's also a ridiculous time already, like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. My grandmother's Cadillac breaks down. My grandmother is notoriously known to be walking around with like mink coats, diamonds, like to the corner store to play her numbers, like that type of energy. So her car breaks down, she got the jewels shining, mink coats on, and she decides to go outside and shoot dice with the dudes that's outside. So sometime later, my uncle rides by and he's like, nah, Aunt Jessie, that's you? What are you doing out here? And she like, you know, getting these niggas for their money. And it's so like quintessential Jessie that like, ma'am, you like, I don't know if there was AAA in the 70s. I assume that there was. But you're not concerned with your car being broken down. You like, well, I'm outside. I might as well be all the way outside and shoot this dice. I think it's hilarious. And it's one of the most notorious stories in my family. So, you know, Isabel Wilkerson has this book called The Warmth of Other Suns. It's a genius book. There's no coincidence. I had dropped out of college and went back to college, and that was one of the first books assigned to me. And it was around the time, maybe a few years in, that my grandmother had passed or whatever. And so that book is literally about the Great Migration. My grandmother was born in 1926. North Carolina, participated in the Great Migration, moved to Harlem, USA, then Brooklyn, then Queens. Queens get the money. It was being in that class. The professor's name was Jacqueline Southern, no pun, right? My grandmother is from the South. I was like, oh yeah, I want to, now that I'm back in school, let me take classes that remind me of my grandmother and my mother. So I never have this feeling again, this feeling like I'm missing out, this feeling like, oh, I should have listen more in depth to those conversations that my grandmother was talking about, or that my Aunt Ethel or my Aunt Dorothy, or, all of these family members that I have, were talking about. And so my grandmother, for real, was a sharecropper. Like, it was 19 of them. There was a farm. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they were literally, getting busy. And so inside of that, her journey to New York, like, my grandmother was a registered nurse. Like, my grandmother went back to college to get her master's degree when my uncles were little. And her commitment to education is so like, ma'am, you got a husband, almost like a teenage daughter, 2 baby boys, and then you're gonna go back to college to get your master's? Like, what's good with you? So it's definitely given sharecropper turned scholar. And I love that for her, and I love that for us. People can talk till they blue in the face. When you doing the thing, it's completely different. And so she never said, like, yeah, she said education was important, but she showed you that education was important by doing that work. And so, yeah, bar none, sharecropper turned scholar, which is the same story that a lot of people have around the world, that look like us. They went to another country, or they, you know what I'm saying, moved to another city, whether it's Chicago, whether it's Jamaica, whether it's Barbados, et cetera, and really like transform their lives because they saw something that was, different, and they wanted to aspire to that, and they did the work to ensure that their goals became reality. I didn't even know I was gonna be on camera, so y'all getting a real deal. Hey. My hair not even dry yet. Like, there's no face hair. This looking crazy. Y'all are insane.
I love it.
Shit's crazy.
This is the type of content I'm here for.
Y'all are nuts.